My name is Lonnie Sanders. Glad to meet you, sir. In 1963, I was drafted by the Washington Redskins to play professional football. Most of our games, exhibition games, were played in the South. At the time, the team was owned by a man named George Preston Marshall. Great marketing guy. Matter of fact, there were no other teams in the National Football League south of the Mason-Dixon line. There was no Miami Dolphins, no New Orleans Saints, no Atlanta Falcons, and no Panthers. As a result of that, we played some of our games in the South. And you can imagine the kind of things that occurred in the South when they showed African American football players with the attitudes that were expressed then. I heard the N-word several times, in, you shouldn't be here, in, go home, etc. But it didn't bother me that much, only because I felt quite protected with the ball club. George Preston Marshall got all those fans in the Washington, D.C. area by sending buses down south, busing them all the way up here, and they became Washington Redskins fans. As a matter of fact, part of the fight song was called Fight for Old Dixie rather than Fight for Old D.C., of which was changed. Well, the N-word stuck with me to the extent that it got to be quite insulting. And let me fast forward for a minute and give credit to the transition team, in my opinion, that made that word somewhat of a word used in our community of joy and happiness. The rappers, they took that word, they owned that word, they made that word a word of joy. In some instances, we could use that word as we chose fit with no repercussions. So it's time for that word to go. We need to transition out of that word and talk about the word sir. Sir is a word of respect. Sir is a word that is respected by everyone, regardless of race, color, or creed. So with the great job that the rappers did with the transition of that word to something that had some meaning to us, we need to transition out of that word. It's like an old pair of shoes. It's time to go. It's like food that has an expiration date in a grocery store. It should be thrown out. We need to adapt the word sir and rid ourselves of the N-word.